Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when and where you're watching this. Welcome to another of the Whiskey Festival in a Box 2.0 recordings. This one is for the delightful Glen Moray Tokaji cask finish. And I'm delighted to say that I've got Iain direct from Glen Moray Distillery joining us. So I'm going to bring him in now. Iain, good morning. How are you doing?
Morning, Eddie. I'm very well. How are you?
Yes, all the better for seeing you and for smelling and tasting Glen Moray, hopefully in a not so long. Just to introduce you, obviously I've known you for many, many years, but there may be one or two people watching this who haven't met or had the honour. So if you could maybe introduce yourself and what you do at Glen Moray and how you got to be doing what you're doing, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as you say, my name's Iain. I am the Visitor Centre Manager and Global Brand Ambassador here at Glen Moray Distillery. I joined Glen Moray back in 2005, 16 years now. At the beginning, it was pretty much focused on the Visitor Centre, developing that side of the business. But over the years, the role has come to evolve and change quite considerably. And I kind of, in non-COVID times, get the opportunity to get out and about and speak to people in market, which is always a pleasure and always fun. And it's at these things generally where I get the opportunity to catch up with guys like yourself, Eddie. So,
Indeed. Well, I know that every single person I've spoken to is absolutely desperate to get back out there and seeing real people in real life, as opposed to just on the screen in front of you. But yeah, they have been a godsend in many ways. If this had happened, even 10 years ago, we simply wouldn't have been able to do the things that we have been able to do, thanks to the technology. But yes, fingers crossed, we will be sharing a dram together at some point in the near future.
I have to agree, Zoom and everything like this, it's been a bit of a love-hate relationship. As you say, I love the fact that we're still able to connect. I hate the fact that it stops us from doing it in person. Well, it's not Zoom to blame, but it has replaced one of the real pleasures of this job, and whiskey, sitting down with people, enjoying a dram.
Yes, indeed. Fingers crossed, light at the end of the tunnel and all that. Anyway, I know the viewers, I'm sure, are keen to get dramming, so if I can ask them to pull their sample of the Glen Moray. Looks like Glen Moray, and I'm sure I wasn't the first or last to think that 30 years ago, or however long ago it was I acquainted myself. But it's in fact Glen Moray.
Glen Moray, yes. I always say Glen Moray as in Andy Murray. So if you know your tennis, then you'll know your whiskey.
Yeah. But tell us, I've pre-poured mine, but tell us a bit about this exciting new bottling, because obviously it's so new that we got it just in time for this event, and I'm very excited about that. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, we were kind of racing against the clock to get this one out there and to you for this, which I'm glad we did, because super excited to get this one out and about. It's a continuation of our Warehouse 1 series, which we began tail end of 2020 with a Sauternes cask release. We've kind of continued that theme with dessert wines, but this time we've gone for the Hungarian Tokaji finish on this one. Warehouse 1, for anybody who has not been to Glen Moray Distillery, this is the warehouse where we house all our kind of different casks, kind of interesting whiskies that we have sitting there. And it's where we take you on tour so we can show you. A lot of these experiments are kind of ongoing. They're not secrets. We point them out and say this is a whiskey that we're keeping an eye on for the future. So we're just really getting to a stage now where we're bringing these whiskies out and getting them available. So the Tokaji cask, I have to admit, when we first filled these, I didn't know what Tokaji was. I have to be completely honest. Since then, I've kind of gone on a bit of a journey of education. In fact, we were tasting some Tokaji in the warehouse just the other week and discovered that I absolutely love it. It's just such an intense, syrupy, sweet, citrusy dessert wine, which has become now one of my new favourite things in life. And the influence it has on the whiskey is fantastic. We've had it in the Tokaji for a little short of a year. It didn't quite make the full year maturation. It's a 15-year-old spirit, so we're looking at 14 years in bourbon before we put it into the Tokaji for that final year of finishing. And it's just, taking the whiskey on such a fantastic journey. We still get some of that kind of lovely, sweet, kind of vanilla bourbon style coming through, which is really quite a hallmark traditional Glen Moray style as well. But just the accentuation of that lovely citrus sweet note that kind of dominates this whiskey. On the front of the box, I think it says, a sweet shop full of flavors, and I think that's probably the best descriptor I can use for this whiskey as a kind of general overview of what you're getting in your glass. So I'll pour myself a dram. Have you got one there in front of you, Eddie?
So what, in terms of flavors one can expect, I mean, I've known Tokaji for some years, having a bit of a wine background as well as whiskey, and I'm glad you've discovered it, because it's one of those real unsung heroes in the wine world. And I think I was going to ask you, actually, have you tried it with your Schneiders yet?
I've not tried it with Snyder's yet, but it's the Snyder's goes with everything, so everybody needs a bit of that in life.
They're deadly.
They are.
But yeah, so obviously Tokaji is very intensely sweet dessert wine. What does it bring to the Glen Moray, do you feel?
Glen Moray is quite a sweet spirit anyway, so you're just kind of building on what is already there. So it as a regular Glen Moray drinker, it's not. It doesn't feel like an explosion of sweetness, and it doesn't feel like it's done, anything too aggressive towards the whiskey, because that sweet baseline within our new make spirit still allows to cut through. We have this lovely kind of citrusy note within the new make spirit anyway, that further enhanced by the maturation in the bourbon, and then just taking that little step further with the introduction of the Tokaji. For me, it's a lot about kind of orange citrus. When we talk about Glen Moray, typically in a normal maturation, we generally kind of leaning in towards that kind of lemony note that comes through. Here, it's far more orangey. There's a slight kind of baked bread, almost gingerbread-like character that comes through on it as well, which is also a kind of feature which we don't see in a kind of typical Glen Moray maturation. But yeah, just it's got a freshness, but there is that lovely kind of sugary sweetness that comes through also. Mm-hmm. So as I say, it's just enhancing what's already there. Anybody who's tried Glen Moray before, anybody who's done any kind of Glen Moray tasting, sweetness is a kind of oft-used term, but it's just about the style of sweetness. And for me, as I say, that lovely kind of gingery bread baked character combined with orange citrus notes as well is what the Tokaji is bringing to the table in this whiskey.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. And what about water? Would you recommend adding water to this?
Absolutely. This is cask strength. It's quite soft cask strength for its age. This one's coming in at 53.8, which is quite low. We normally look for it to, we normally expect it to be, 55, 56, 57, there or thereabouts, cask strength for a whiskey of this age. Not sure whether that was coming from the fact that maybe the bourbon cask lost a bit prior to transfer, or whether in that final year within the Tokaji it dropped a bit. Not sure what the story is there. It'll be interesting to see when we look at some of the other Tokajis that we have, because we've got more sitting in warehouse, different age points, and we'll leave for different finishes to see what that does to the strength of those. But this one, in this case, what we've got is quite a low ABV. So you get away without water if you are used to drinking cask strength whiskies, and if you're happy diving straight in. But the additional water, I think, brings more of that kind of Tokaji influence out. It kind of mutes the background flavors of the bourbon just a little bit and brings a lovely kind of, it feels slightly more kind of sticky in character, which you would expect if you are a Tokaji kind of drinker. So it's really quite interesting. Additional water does change it considerably. Play around with it, see what suits, see what you prefer. As I say, at 53.8, you're not going to get your head blown off with it, so you'll find it pretty accessible.
Yeah. I mean, I find it brings like you say, a kind of aromatic orange blossom, maybe a slight honey, but just, yeah, there's just definitely a really lovely, quite viscous finish to it, which is really quite welcome.
Glen Moray spirit initially as well is quite a viscous spirit. We have this kind of oily, kind of natured style new make spirit. So, when it's showcased at cask strength, this is allowed to shine through, or anything non-chill filtered. This is allowed to come through, and just that thickness and viscosity that comes with it, and it really suits this style of wine cask. We've done Sauternes previously. That worked really well as well. So I think, this kind of dessert wine, that kind of thick, syrupy style wine character works well with Glen Moray in general. We've carved out a bit of a niche for ourselves with wine casks over the years. And it's quite it's such an open category for experimentation, playing around with all different wine varietals. Not even just the varietals, but within wine producers. We''ve switched between Californian Chardonnays to French Chardonnays just to see the influence it has on it. So it's, for a kind of whiskey maker, it's a fascinating kind of area to delve into, because the options are almost endless with cask options. Playing around with wine casks and stuff like this. As I drink wine, but I would never claim to be extremely knowledgeable. But it's opened up a whole new category for me with the Hungarian Tokaji casks. I put a bottle in my house. I've started to learn a little bit more about it, and the influence it's had in the whiskey is fantastic. We have to credit Glen Moray last year bringing out their Tail of Cake. They kind of paved the way for us. I'd not really heard of it prior to that. I'm pretty sure there are some people who've done it, some whiskies that have maybe taken Tokaji before, but it kind of skipped over me. So, it's great to see the influence it can have on our whiskey. Anyway, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, here's to more to come as well, by the sounds of it. Well, while we're enjoying that dram, would you be so kind as to just give us a little bit of background on Glen Moray and how it came to be about and when it came to be about, and just any details like that?
Yeah, so kind of potted history of Glen Moray. We were first established in 1897. The time, it was a pretty checkered start with the Paddison crash and everything else. So the distillery really didn't fall into a steady period of production until the 1920s, when it was picked up by MacDonald and Muir, who Glenmorangie owners as well. And during that period of time, there was a pretty steady continual run of production, with a lot of the stock heading onwards for blending. So the brand of Glen Moray, whilst it ticked along nicely, it was never really allowed to, or able to spread its wings too far. And the real kind of shift in gear for Glen Moray as a distillery came in 2008, when the then owners of Glenmorangie decided to sell the distillery off. So it was an LVMH sale to the company now is LMB, Lamartine Bardonnay. And that really kind of heralded a new era for Glen Moray. And it's been great to be involved in this period, and just to see kind of the distillery able to kind of stretch its wings and be able to become more of an export brand, and also be more of a single malt in its own right. We still provide quite a considerable amount of stock towards blends, typically our own company's blends. So we have Label 5. Recently we acquired Curry Sark, and we have another blend called Sir Edward's, which we are a kind of core provider for the malt content for these blends. Curry Sark less so at the moment, but long term that will become a thing. But to enable us to do this, and to enable to allow Glen Moray to develop and to be brought to a wider market, we had to expand the production. So in the intervening years of the purchase in 2008 to where we are now, we've went through a series of expansions, growing the distillery from an annual capacity of 2.2 million litres to where we are today, which is 6 million litres. And it's that expansion, that investment, that allowed Glen Moray to become a whiskey which is available in 60 markets around the world, where we are focusing, our attentions, quite heavily in the US and Australia, China has become quite a key market to us in recent years. So the Far East, which is a market which was relatively untouched for Glen Moray, has become a kind of key market, and then everything else across Europe as well. So it feels like it's an exciting new dawn for a distillery, which has been working quite quietly in the background. And it's been great to be a part of that and see that grow and see the distillery reach its potential, because I've always felt, in my time, that Glen Moray is a fantastic spirit, a versatile spirit, and been deserved to be showcased in this fashion, as well as our core range, our classics, which we'll still continue to do at 40% and allowing kind of access single malt, a much softer approach, but to show a different side to it in this. And Warehouse 1 is a part of a series of whiskies, which we'll be bringing out. The other two are slated for this year. We've got a 22-year-old Barolo finish. So again, continuing that wine approach, but this time Italian red wines, which I think is phenomenal. I absolutely love that one and looking forward to that one coming out. And then the third release, should I say, for this year will be a Manzanilla finish. So just kind of developing that sherried approach, which we've done well in the past, but we've typically stuck to Oloroso. So now we'll be kind of branching into other styles of sherry, which is again an exciting untapped field for us of late.
Well, we've definitely got plenty going on then. I was going to ask you also, Iain, do you feel there are any particular things during the production process or perhaps equipment at Glen Moray which differs from a standard single malt outfit? Anything that kind of makes the brand or the distillery stand apart from other distillers in the area?
It doesn't make the distillery stand out necessarily from a production perspective, but from a visual aesthetic perspective. Anybody coming to the distillery, well, initially, one of the first kind of key areas you'll see a big difference is to allow us to expand. We shifted all our washbacks outdoors. So we have these sealed washbacks. So aesthetically, that looks quite different from other distillers. The rest of the areas, that are influencing the character and style, we have quite short spirit stills. These generally they've got quite a low line arm, which is really allowing that kind of character of our spirit to come through, creating a lovely sweetness to our spirit. I think the stills influence them quite considerably. But adding that oily character to it, which makes it quite robust as a spirit, quite versatile, and it makes it a great spirit for blending because you can do a lot to it. You can bring it out at a very young age and casks that are relatively inactive because you've maybe got this lovely sweet character inbuilt with the original spirit, but it's got that robustness to it that allows for really kind of elongated maturations in casks that are quite active and quite overpowering. European oak sherry casks, we've gone 18, 20 odd years, and you can still pick out the character of the Glen Moray's new make still shining through as well. So, the stills themselves have a key part to play. The rest of the process, we coming through the distillery, you go in, we've got a Porteous 4-roll mill, which you'll see in a lot of distilleries. We've got a semi-lighter mash tun. The size of that is 11 tons, so it's a kind of decent sized mash tun as well. And beyond that, these are the kind of key areas. What we've got at the distillery is quite a big site. It's quite deceiving. Anybody passing the road who's maybe not actually taking the effort to pop into Glen Moray, you can see it from the main road driving between Inverness and Aberdeen here. You'd be forgiven for thinking it's quite a small site, but it's quite a big site. And, what that allows us to do is it allows us to mature everything for us here at Glen Moray. We have warehousing capacity for about 130,000 casks here on site, which gives us the opportunity to oversee everything direct from the distillery. So we'll disgorge and we'll select casks and everything. So we've got a lot of control here on the site for our spirit, which is, I think, is a good thing. It means that the people that are closest to it are, most involved in the creation of the final product. Once it's been disgorged and vatted, we send it off down to our head office down in Bathgate for bottling. So it makes its way down to the far south for heading off for bottling from there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm trying to think the last time I saw you there. I think it was probably about 5 years ago, maybe. And I think you'd just done the most recent expansion at that point. And it was, I mean, it was incredible to see the new parts of the distillery. And like you say, you don't see it until you're up close to it. So it kind of sneaks up on you.
It does, and a lot of people are surprised at the size of the distillery, and not just the size of the site, but that kind of production capacity of 6 million litres. Whilst we are in an era where you can easily find a 20 million production, just a few years ago that would have been a considerably large production. Yeah. So that in itself is a slight kind of surprise for a lot of people, but I like to think Glen Moray does surprise people. People have perceptions and ideas, particularly based on price point. We've always been a relatively affordably priced whiskey, and some people will judge you based on the price without having tried it. So it's nice to break down perceptions. And folk.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly from that visit, I remember you taking us to the warehouse, and we were trying some cask samples that would make anyone's toes curl. They were just sensational. And you obviously, I think you have 2 or 3 now bottle your own casks in the visitor center as well, so it's well worth a visit. And don't allow your preconceptions to get in the way of what is a fantastic whiskey.
Just having Glen Moray at cask strength, for me, still feels fresh, new, and exciting within a product such as the Tokaji that we have here. Because for many years, they were, unless you were buying through independents, you certainly would struggle to find a Glen Moray bottled by Glen Moray at single cask or at cask strength. Mm-hmm. We've now kind of embraced that, because we had so many people coming to us, particularly from, independents such as SMWS, where a lot of Glen Moray was trickling through, coming up and saying, have you got something like, Glen Moray and SMWS? And for many years we were like, we don't do that. Or if we did, it wasn't very often. Now, here's 3 cask strengths coming along. We've got a single cask program being released internationally as well. And as you say, you can pop up the distillery and choose from 3 single casks and bottle your own. And we also do distillery exclusives at single casks. And that really is showing a very different side to the distillery, which previously, as I say, unless you were buying through independents, you wouldn't find too easily. So. Yeah.
No, it's great to see the evolution. Now, I was going to ask you about what does the future hold, but I think you've answered all of that through the last passage, so that's great. So I'm going to move on to the final question, if you don't mind, Iain.
Just to jump back and interrupt. Sorry, that's the future for the UK. I don't know. Are these packs going international here, or?
Well, you can certainly talk about your.
Yeah. So the Warehouse One. Sorry for anybody watching out with the UK. Is a UK release, but internationally, we are looking. We've been talking about bringing a 30-year-old into our core range. So look out for that. Possibly tail end of this year, starting next year. That'll be a wider, more available release. As I touched on there, we have the private cask program going out. So the first one of those was just released 2 weeks ago. Is a Marsala release. So some countries around the world will start to see those available in retailers. And also we have a global release of a Curiosity series, which is tapping into a slightly kind of more interesting. Well, Tokaji is quite interesting, I should say. So it should be in. It could fit that kind of style of release, but to bring a slightly bigger release, we're doing Curiosity globally as well. So. A lot of exciting things happening, not just here in the UK, but elsewhere.
Yes, absolutely. And now, just in terms of the current state of the whiskey industry internationally, globally, how do you feel? How do you feel it's going? Do you feel it's in rude health? Are there any concerns or anything exciting that you see coming around the corner?
Well, for us, international. it still feels quite new. Okay, we're maybe further down the line than my memory serves. I've got very something that feels like was yesterday was probably 10 years ago. We have been owned by LMB now since 2008, which so that's coming up to 13 years of ownership. But at the moment, it still feels like exporting Glen Moray feels quite new and fresh. But in every new market that opens up, as I touched upon, the Far East with China in particular is proving a very kind of fresh new growth for us. In the past couple of years, it's shot up our kind of sales charts. So every new market, every kind of global market is still an immature market to some extent for Glen Moray. There are one or two Australia where we've been kind of around for a while. So, we're still in the honeymoon period with regards to that, I think. Maybe speak to our sales guys, they maybe speak it differently. So we're getting used to it. We're starting to see it pushed out. We have developed a duty-free range, which for me, and as part of my role as global brand ambassador, was almost a frustration. Walking through an airport and being greeted with this wall of whiskey and never really seeing Glen Moray on it. So that's an exciting thing for us. So the challenge for us is getting our voice heard. Speaking from a Glen Moray perspective, tapping into our kind of stocks of interesting different casks and that kind of portfolio of stuff that's a little bit quirky and a little bit different that we've got sitting there, that's full maturations, not just finishes, will hopefully allow us that opportunity to stand above and be that slightly different voice. So for us, that's the challenge. There's a lot of whiskies out there now, and there's more to come with all the new distilleries that are starting to pop up and starting to throw their hat into the ring with regards to different brands out there. What we've got, as I say, that allow us to differentiate is, a fair decent amount of years production behind us. And that long-term production means that we have warehouse of aged stock. And what is good, as I say, is that aged stock is not necessarily in the casks that generally people are used to seeing. We've got some quite quirky little fills in there, which is a legacy from Glenmorangie, but that legacy has been continued by LMB as well, where we will continue to have experimentation at the heart of what we do here at Glen Moray, which is fun for us. So for us, it's new, the global market. The past year, I've not been able to get out there and see exactly what's happening, on the ground with regards to how COVID's affected things. But working on Zoom, we've got new distributors in different markets, and they're super keen to get behind the brand, and they're talking quite optimistically about Scotch in particular in the market. So from my perspective, things are, they've been hampered, but hopefully once, we get past all of this, there'll be a kind of unlocking and things hopefully will get back to where they were, and hopefully we'll see a bit of growth off the back of it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Iain, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a really wonderful tasting and great chance to catch up and talk all things Glen Moray. So thank you for that. Also, thanks to the viewers for buying into the festival in a box, and I hope you're all safe and well and enjoying the festival so far. So, Iain, thanks once again. Slanjavar to you.
Thanks, Eddie. It's always a pleasure. So
look forward to getting together in person as soon as possible.
Yep, and I hope everybody who's bought the pack, they enjoy the Glen Moray Tokaji, and hopefully get to share a dram of it with them sometime in the future, like yourself in person, at a festival or in a bar somewhere, or at the distillery. You're welcome.
Yeah, exactly. Well, brilliant. Thanks very much, Iain, and see you very soon.
Thanks, Eddie.